I'm a sucker for a charming guy with an accent, and this guy is as charming as they come with an accent that's, depending on whichever version you see, can be beautiful or as muddy as the bayou that he comes from. If you haven't figured it out by now, today we're going to be breaking down Remy LeBeau, aka Gambit of the X-Men. I love doing these little breakdowns and going deeper into their motives and beliefs. I'm excited to share my ramblings with you and would appreciate any support by giving this video a like or subscribing to future content. As always, here's how we'll break it down. Their story arc and the key moments that shape them, the personality type and why it fits them so perfectly, and the traumas, wounds, and experiences that drive their behavior. We begin this tale of Le Diable Blanc with a little bit of backstory as always. Remy LeBeau was born in New Orleans to parents who abandoned him at the hospital. Why? Because he was born with black and bright red eyes. The leader of the Thieves Guild, Jean-Luc LeBeau, takes Remy and gives him to a gang of street thieves led by Fagin, another member thinking him to be the one prophesied to restore the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom is an ancient society who has a prophecy that says that a red-eyed infant, dubbed Le Diable Blanc, or the White Devil, would eventually restore the Old Kingdom to its former glory. Around 8 years old, Remy saves a young girl being bullied by thugs. This little girl ends up being Belladonna Baudoir, daughter of the Assassin's Guild leader. There's a lot of French in this. Remy and Belladonna becomes best friends and eventually they fall in love. Right around puberty, Remy's powers begin to wake up, but he keeps them a secret for obvious reasons. At age 15, he goes with his cousin Etienne Marceau to complete this tilling, which is the initiation test for the Thieves Guild. Unfortunately, they're captured by a mutant, Candra, and sells them to the mutant slave trader, the Pig. There's a lot of French in this, and I'm probably botching every single bit of it, and I apologize for that. The Pig plans on selling him to Hydra to train as a soldier. He escapes them and discovers his favorite way of fighting, playing cards. Thus, his powers were born. Using kinetic energy and charging up any object, he's able to launch them and make them go boom. He eventually joins the X-Men, has some fallouts with them many times thanks to his past and his alliances with the Thieves Guild, and at one point even becomes one of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse, known as Death. Throughout his life, he's been married twice. Once to Belladonna Baudoir in order to unite the Thieves and the Assassin's Guilds, but unfortunately that fell apart when her brother challenged Remy to a duel. Remy wins, but this puts him in exile from New Orleans. And of course, you cannot bring up Remy LeBeau unless you also bring up Rogue, or Anna Marie. Truly one of the most heartfelt relationships in Marvel Comics. Rogue is another mutant who can see memories and steal life force with just a bit of skin-on-skin action. You can see how that can be troublesome with a relationship.
Skin on skin.
That's why I wrote it that way. But Remy finds something in her that refuses to let come between them. There are a few hiccups along the way, Belladonna coming back, asking for help, and even a moment with Magneto and Rogue. Ew. But current runs of the X-Men comics have them happily married and thriving. We have Rogue finishing up her 5-comic run this month in her own little story, and Gambit has his own in the future starting in July. Side note, I really want this cover so bad. Anyway, putting on my fangirl to the side, we've discussed the history of this character. Now it's time to get into the personality profile. We have our very first version of this personality profile today. Gambit is considered an ISTP, also known as the Virtuoso. Introverted, sensing, thinking, and perceiving. They tend to be action-oriented, logical, analytical, and spontaneous. They enjoy adventure and are skilled at understanding things. Why introverted, you ask? Because the man seems pretty extroverted on the outside. We'll go over that in a bit, but when we get down to the letters. ISTPs love to make things. They find happiness in getting their hands dirty, pulling things apart and putting them back together. With this type, though, they usually handle things with first-hand experience. Trial and error, if you will. And as they figure things out, they prefer to work at their own pace, at their own terms. They don't tend to socialize too much unless they find their small little groups that they can trust. They prefer smaller, more meaningful interactions over everyday ones. With Gambit, we see this in a couple of ways. He's a thief on the streets of New Orleans. He is literally a pickpocket, getting his hands dirty and taking what he can. He trusts his little group of thieves and eventually his X-Men companions. But anyone outside of that is not privy to him or his time. Question is, would he have been different if he weren't a mutant or if he didn't have those black and red eyes? Who knows? At their core, ISTPs like to do their own thing, not listen to societal norms. They're in it for the experience and interactions. They look for the opportunities. They follow their instincts, making their own course and living freely. This is Remy LeBeau. He runs the Thieves Guild, he makes his own way, and he relies on his instincts to get him out of sticky situations. So why introverted instead of extroverted? He's charming, flirtatious, comfortable in social situations, and loves attention and banter. Well, yes, these things are true. But is that his personality, or is that his survival instincts? His charm is a mask, not a need. It's a tool trained into him as a thief and a survivor. He uses it to control situations and keep people at a safe distance, not because social connections recharges him. Real extroverts tend to think out loud and share openly. Gambit guards his inner world fiercely, even from Rogue, the love of his life. He retreats when things get real. When emotional depth is required, he deflects, disappears, or shuts down. That's an introvert protecting their inner world. He's most himself alone or in a small, trusted circle. The crowd-loving version of Gambit is a performance. Strip that away, and he's a solitary, brooding, and deeply private man. So now that we've established who he is and why he's more introverted, let's break down the letters. Introverted. He's deeply secretive, shares little, and processes emotions internally. During the Morlock Massacre arc, Gambit carries his guilt over leading the Marauders to the Murlocs. That's not the right word. That's not the right word. I knew I was going to do that. Gambit carried his guilt over leading the Marauders to the Morlocks alone for years. The X-Men only learn the truth when Storm's team puts him on trial. He processed that shame entirely internally, letting it quietly eat him rather than ever seeking absolution. Even with the woman he loved most, Gambit withheld his past constantly. Rogue repeatedly had to pull truth out of him. He expressed love through action and presence, almost never through emotional vulnerability or open conversations about his inner life. Sensing, he lives in the moment, a thief and a fighter who relies on what's real and immediately in front of him. Gambit doesn't strategize from a distance like Cyclops or Xavier. He improvises in real time, reading the immediate environment, grabbing whatever is physically in front of him, like cards, debris, furniture, and weaponizes it on the spot. His power itself is tactile and immediate. He has to touch something to charge it. Thinking. He makes cold, calculated decisions even if it costs him emotionally. Gambit killed Belladonna's brother Julian in a duel to honor the guild law, knowing full well it would destroy his marriage and get him exiled from New Orleans, the only home he's ever known. He didn't let emotion override the logic of the situation. He accepted the personal cost and acted anyway. Perceiving. He's an improviser by nature. He adapts on the fly and resists rigid structure. Gambit and Cyclops clash repeatedly because Scott Summers runs on rules, hierarchy, and structured tactics, as we've discussed in our Cyclops breakdown. Gambit openly resists that. He deviates from the plan mid-mission if his instincts hold him to it. He operates on feeling rather than protocol, which drove Cyclops insane. Even within the Thieves Guild, which has its own codes and structures, Gambit routinely bent or broke the rules when they didn't suit him. He operated by his own moral improvisation rather than any fixed code, picking and choosing which obligations to honor based on the moment. With all that being said, what are his strengths and weaknesses? Let's start with the strengths. Highly adaptable. He thrives in chaos and unpredictability, keeping his head in the game. He's cool under pressure. He rarely gets rattled in crisis situations. Living on the streets will do that. Independent. He's self-sufficient and he doesn't need external validation. Resourceful. He solves problems creatively with what's available. He can use anything with his powers. Loyal in action. He shows love through deeds, not words. He cooks for Rogue, and even though her powers make it impossible to be close to her, he stays. For an emotionally avoidant ISTP, his constant pursuit is enormous. And now his weaknesses. Emotionally avoidant. He deflects vulnerability with charm and humor. It's safer that way in his mind. Commitment adverse. Struggles to stay with things when they get emotionally complex. Minus Rogue, any other issues arise, he dips before it gets bad. Secretive to a fault. He withholds information even when honesty would help. Being vulnerable or trusting people does not come easy. Self-isolating under guilt. Internalizing shame rather than seeking support. He's not going to drag others into his messes. Risk addicted. Drawn to danger in ways that can be self-destructive. Sometimes you don't feel alive unless you're sacrificing something. Risk is worth the reward, right? With a man like Remy LeBeau, there's gotta be some trauma. A baby that was abandoned, living as a thief and a mutant. It's ripe with trauma. So here's some of the key ones. Abandonment at birth. He never knew his parents, and in the comics, they don't even mention names for them. Once they saw the color of his eyes, they left him there without a thought. This shapes his deep fear of rejection and difficulty trusting anyone. It's the first thing he's learned. You can't trust those around you, even if they're your parents. Child exploitation by the guild. The man never had a normal childhood. It started with him hanging around a bunch of thieves and raised by the man that ran the guild. His whole identity was built around utility and skill. If you weren't useful, then you weren't worth keeping around. That can do something to a kid. Exile from New Orleans. Imagine the one thing you know and love is taken away from you. Remy knew and loved the streets of New Orleans, and he knew the duel between him and Julian would get him kicked out, but it was a choice of honor and pride. He wasn't going to back down, and unfortunately, that cost him the one thing he's had his entire life: his city. The Morlock Massacre. This is a moment that Remy will remember for the rest of his life. He's the one that gathered the Marauders for Sinister, and it's that very team that hunts the Morlocks. He's only able to save one little girl who grows up to become Marrow in the X-Men. It's a defining moral wound for him. When it finally came out, Rogue, the woman that he loved, left him over it. His greatest shame cost him his greatest relationship. That's a devastating confirmation of his core fear. If people truly know me, then they will leave. Trial and exile by the X-Men. Because of this, he was exiled by the only healthy family he's ever had. He was betrayed by them, giving up on him after all of the energy trying to better himself. Once again, it reinforced that thought that he will always be cast out for who he is. And that is Remy LeBeau, Le Diable Blanc, the White Devil. A man who was handed every reason to be exactly the villain his eyes promised that he would be. Abandoned at birth, exploited as a child, exiled from the only home he's ever known, and carrying a massacre on his conscience that he never fully asked for, but could never fully escape. And yet, he stays. He cooks for those he cares about. He calls Rogue Cher, his love and his heart. He shows up in every way he physically can for a woman that he can't even touch. That's not nothing. For a man wired by the way he is, that's everything. What makes Gambit so compelling, psychologically and just as the character, is that he's not a hero because it came naturally to him. He's a hero in spite of every single thing that shaped him. The ISTP who learned that vulnerability gets you abandoned. The thief who learned that people only keep you around if you're useful. The man who internalized the worst thing that ever did and carried it alone for years because that's just what you do when you've never been taught that you're worth forgiving. He's not perfect. He's messy and avoidant, and he will absolutely disappear on you before letting you see him fall apart. But he's trying. And sometimes that's the most human thing the character can do. If you enjoyed today's breakdown, give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I would love to know, who do you want to break down next? Drop it in the comments below. And as always, thank you for being here. Au revoir.